I guess my first question will be to either of you, whoever wants to jump in. How did this become a thing? Why is this so popular, and who's doing it?
Well, certainly Kevin can jump in, but it's been a thing for a long time. Certainly at EA, we've used both our Madden franchise and our FIFA franchise to put gamers together competitively as a marketing event. And that's been going on for 10, 12 years. In the last few years, you've seen scale. You've seen games that have been built for competitive gaming. The most famous, I think, probably everybody's aware of, League of Legends.
Well, they're probably not aware of it.
Well, I'm sure everybody's heard of League of Legends because 100 million people played League of Legends last month. People in your homes are playing League of Legends, Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Go. And then, of course, you've got console games such as we produce. But this is rapidly, for the young males of the millennial generation, become their sports. The proponents of these games are their athletes. They do not go in the living room to watch programs that they have to wait for on the couch to start. They think that's ridiculous. They're in their bedrooms, they're in their studies, they've got 2 screens going, they've got Twitch going on one, they're texting strategy to their friends, they're ready to go live.
They're commenting.
They're ready to go at 8 o'clock when the team gets together to go take on some quest. And it truly is both an opportunity for traditional sports to embrace, and we can talk about that, but also a threat to traditional sports from an engagement and viewing perspective as we think of the next few years.
And so Kevin, your platform, Twitch, I mean, this is the venue that people usually watch these kind of sports on. Why don't you talk a little bit about how that came about? I know Twitch didn't even start as a video game streaming company.
Yeah, so this, it's funny because we always have to talk about, yes, people actually watch people play video games, but in fact, it's something we've been habituated to do since consoles really came out, right? When Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, 2-player machines, and oftentimes more than 2 players playing. And you experience this through high school, through college, and as this generation grew up, you're sitting there either playing or watching your friends playing, and you're smack talking, you're competitive, and you're constantly engaged whether you're playing or not. And so Twitch is really just the translation of that online. So Twitch is a live global video platform. We call it social video, where chat and engagement around the video is as much of the experience as just watching the video itself. But it came about, we originally were Justin TV, live video platform for the whole world, free to use, free to watch.
This was the early days before Facebook Live
2007, 2008. Started with one man, Justin Kahn, who decided to stream his life 24/7, which was an interesting idea. And then we decided we wanted to take it in a different direction. So we latched onto our own passions. We were less than 10 people at the time. Of video games.
And did you notice a lot of people just happened to be showing themselves play video games? Like, ooh, this is interesting.
It was definitely starting to happen then. Yeah, I'd say first on YouTube, right, in VOD format. People would upload videos on demand for people to watch, whether they were for education or for fun. And we just translated that into the live world.
So let's talk a little bit about the demographics. So when I think of an esports player or esports viewer, I think young millennial men, maybe even younger generation Z, 15 and under maybe, and that's about it. Is that accurate? Is that the bulk of the audience? And if so, can that expand beyond to be a more mainstream audience?
I think so right now, but one of the things that we at EA are working on certainly is bringing more of a mass market approach with our sports franchises, which are a little easier to understand than MOBAs. Massive online battle arena games.
Right. So this is stuff people know. Madden football,
this is Madden
FIFA,
football,
soccer.
FIFA, NHL, the sports games that we have. I think both the attraction to the young millennial males as well as the challenge is that the games that they play are complex. The games that they watch, and about 40% of people who watch esports actually don't play the games, which is an interest. They love watching it, they don't actually play. And very similar, actually, traditional sports.
Right.
I love the NFL. I've never played in the NFL, and I've never played football, but I love watching it. But I think, to your question, I think for the most part, I think the secret is bringing more mass market games to more of a mass market that they can play and engage. The other challenge a little bit is that the skill set and the dedication required to play these games competitively and professionally is right now the domain of young men who have the time and have the energy and the dedication. and almost the hand-eye coordination. We're seeing, and Kevin sees this more than me, is that the people playing are in their early 20s, and then when you reach at a professional level, 25, 26, you're over the hill. You think about retiring then because you can't keep up with the kids.
Right, you actually
You
can
cannot
age
keep
out
up.
just like a
Yeah.
baseball player might age out.
More like swimming and gymnastics, where you kind of age out. A lot of it is to do with the amount of dedication, time, training that you have
How
to
much
put into
Mountain
it.
Dew you're chugging.
See, there goes the stereotype. Right there. But a lot of it is the hand-eye coordination and just keeping up with the strategy of the game.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to touch on this later, but it kind of segues into something I want to ask you about, and that's the kind of darker side of esports. So very popular, the stakes are high, the prize money is high, and there have been reports and stories about people, there is doping, there's cheating, and you think, how does someone dope on esports? I mean, can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Adderall and Ritalin.
Adderall, I've even heard marijuana.
Depends on what game you play.
Yeah, it depends on what game you're playing. So I mean, how do you guys, when you guys are, so EA is doing a lot of tournaments now, how do you combat that? I mean, is there drug testing like there is in professional regular sports? I mean, how do you guys combat that?
As with traditional sports, you've got all of the things you said. There's gambling involved, typically outside of the US, so there's match fixing, there is drug taking for alertness, amphetamines, Ritalin and Adderall are tested for. There is cheating because a lot of the qualifiers are online, and you're looking for people who are looking to exploit the game,
right.
and without somebody looking over their shoulders or a crowd watching them. So no different than and because there's big money involved, and no different than traditional sports, you get all of that. At EA, we've developed codes of conduct for people who enter our tournaments, and we've developed those, and you have to sign those, because the one thing, and Kevin can attest this, there's got to be integrity in the game experience. If somehow the gamer feels that in some way that people are exploiting or cheating them, there's no integrity, that the entire ecosystem falls apart. The integrity of the game, that you are on a fair playing field, is critical to the growth of this business.
And just like regular physical sports too, that's what. So talk about what the audience wants, Kevin. So you guys are feeding the audience these tournaments. Talk a little bit about the integrity and maybe what kinds of games people are also gravitating towards. Are they going towards still these massive multiplayer online games, or are they going towards? Are you seeing stuff like from Peter's company start to bubble up too?
Yeah, absolutely. On the integrity point, you gotta remember, esports has really only been around for 20 years-ish, and realistically only about 6 since this sort of second run of esports. So a lot of the work that needs to get done from a governance perspective is still happening. And it's going to take all the parts of the ecosystem, from the game companies, platforms. Obviously, we care about it. Speaking about the audience, they desire that integrity as well. They want to know that what they're watching is real and something that they can personally achieve, right? That's sort of the beauty, the aspiration of competitive gaming, is anybody can play. But then team owners, players, all the other parts in between really need to come up with agreeable rules of conduct for players, really one-strike policies, right? The only way to really keep the game clean is if you have that. But you still see it in traditional sports, right? All the controversy is still there, the cheating, the gambling, the doping. Olympics, it happens. So it's not that easy to tease out, but I think esports has a particularly unique opportunity to set a really good tone there. But in terms of what the audience wants, variety is huge on Twitch. Esports is what a lot of people talk about, but casual games work, retro games work. Super Mario Brothers, people do speedrunning competitions sometimes, or they're just streaming their regular gameplay. I mean, the fact is you can stream what you are doing anyway. Whatever game you're playing, if you're entertaining or educational or funny, you can draw an audience, and that's what they want. They want that depth of connection, and that's one unique thing about esports is the players are readily available for you to talk to and engage with, and even play along with. I mean, if you could actually watch, we were talking earlier, LeBron James scrimmage, or analyze a replay, or just talk about what he thinks about while he's on the court, people would probably tune in for that. And then one step further, actually being able to go and play with the guy, that's what you get in esports. And that's a part of the ecosystem that is not to be undervalued. That's that depth of connection with the audience.
So let's talk about the audience size. I mean, you probably have better numbers on this than anyone. What's a good audience size for one of these tournaments?
Oh, I mean, some of them hit tens of millions over the
watching?
course. That's total uniques that tuned in.
Okay, what about like a concurrent live stream?
Yeah, concurrents you'll see in the millions, low millions, and that's a global audience. But we see that pretty frequently now. So whether it's League of Legends or Dota, you're starting to see audience grow, particularly. Well, it's very distributed. I mean, our audience is about 30%, 35% North America, 35% Europe, and then about 20% APAC, and then Latin America is growing. So it is a very global audience, and they're interacting with the content at the same time. They're staying up till 4 a.m. and you're still tuning in. So you're starting to see people really gravitate towards that really deep engaging experience. I mean, people are spending 2 hours a day on average watching content in general. During some of these tournaments, they're watching 8 to 12 hours a day.
Wow, and just have it on just constantly.
Leave it on.
And it's not just online. I know you guys at EA are working on more physical tournaments, having people fill up stadiums. I remember last summer, summer of 2015, Madison Square Garden was full of thousands of people for a League of Legends tournament. That's where the Knicks play and the Rangers play, and people are here cheering them on in real time. So why don't you talk a little bit about how EA is trying to capitalize on that?
Yeah, and we're still building our community. So this past weekend, I was in Los Angeles. We did the Madden Classic. It was live on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook Live. The NFL Network covered it live. And interestingly, Univision were there with a crew because they see a huge opportunity to engage with a young male Hispanic demographic here in America that is, again, they've got to go get. And this is the common theme we're hearing from broadcasters, from consumer brands, is how do we get to this young male that is no longer in the living room, sat on the couch waiting for a television program to start and therefore watching television advertising. So we were in studio. There are several layers and tiers of this event. We were in studio creating a made-for-TV type event with our great partners ESL. Twitch was there, and we were broadcasting live. We will have bigger arena events down the road. As Kevin and I know that they're not inexpensive, but they're aspirational. Because I want everybody to think of competitive gaming as a pyramid, and esports is the very peak of that pyramid, but there are tens of millions of young men primarily that are playing, wanting to be there. And the monetization levels and the engagement levels we have are immense at the bottom of the pyramid. No different than traditional sports. I always give the analogy, I was born and bred in Liverpool in England, and I was going to play for Liverpool. No, I wasn't, right. But my dad bought me boots, and my dad bought me shin guards, and millions will like me.
Games.
And I went to games, and I was monetized by the sport, and there were millions of me. And that is the analogy we use here. Our vision at EA is to make stars out of all of our players and to make them feel special and reward them accordingly. The events that you're referring to are aspirational, as it is me going to a Premier League game when I was a kid and thinking I could play here one day. Madison Square Garden, there are millions of kids practicing League of Legends and hopefully Madden, saying, I could play there one day. The aspiration is no different in competitive gaming that there is in traditional sports.
And that's a perfect segue. So the massive audience is there, it's growing, there's already money being thrown around, but how do you make this even a bigger business? How do you monetize these people? What kind of ad deals? What do ads even look like on this? Maybe Kevin, you could start with that just on Twitch.
So a lot of the traditional entertainment models apply. Today, advertising is probably the largest chunk, depends on what report you read, of how the industry monetizes now. There's now also subscriptions. So not payment-gated subscriptions, but people are actually paying to engage with the content further. Then there's donations, there's sponsorships, there's event-based ticketing, merchandise, food and beverage, but there's also in-game items, and that's a really big part of the ecosystem that is, I think, underutilized right now. You look at one of the biggest tournaments in the world, it's only 2 weeks long, called The International. It's a Dota 2 game by Valve, and they create this item called the Compendium. It's $9.99. You buy it, and 25% of that goes towards the prize pool. And the prize pool's gone up from the very first international was $1.7 million. It is now $21 million a year and climbing. Last year it was 18. So that means the top team walks away with $7 million, $8 million. 5 players, typically average age is like 18 years old, right?
What could go wrong there?
What could go wrong? And that $21 million that goes to the prize, you got to remember the game companies is making $60 million on top of that, right? And
From the in-purchase.
from the in-game item purchasing, so no brand sales, nothing. And that is a very unique piece that I think game companies and esports really have that help diversify the revenue. And it's obviously
Beyond just
big,
advertising.
it's obviously a big potential, big numbers there.
Now, Peter, I know you're working with more traditional advertisers as well. Is there anyone so far, I know it's early still for you guys, but is there anyone who's stood out? Do you have any examples of people who have done interesting things?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of partners that we've had for many years that love in-game advertising. They love our core demographic and the innovative ways in which they can engage through the game.
And when you say in-game advertising, that's if I'm playing Madden on the sidelines, there's a Coca-Cola ad or something.
Even more than that, there will be, I mean, the things we do will typically be not just impressions with those but how do we go to retail and digital codes under caps that you buy a Coca-Cola and you get a code to an NFL player download as part of Ultimate Team. And that is huge for us. The traditional brands that have always been involved in video games, the Mountain Dews, the Doritos, for better or worse.
Really playing to that stereotype.
And that's where I was going, for better or worse, if you will, continue to invest, and they've been great supporters of the brand. The company that impresses me most right now is Coca-Cola, and they've invested in not only actually putting money behind sponsorships, but building divisions, esports division, with the head Matt Wolf, who's been a big proponent of this for many years, now driving Coca-Cola and all of their sub-brands involvement. Coca-Cola realizes, as I mentioned earlier, that the traditional model that Kevin referred to is no longer working, of television advertising, particularly this time of year. You think of the holidays and you think of Coca-Cola TV commercials with
The polar bears.
Yeah. Well, that's not working anymore. And you know, I was looking at data today that says Coke and Pepsi, the consumer is aging. And they're both very aware that they've got to, if you will, go into the bedroom and go engage with the young men via a Twitch stream or YouTube on demand and engage with these consumers. And so they're investing heavily but smartly in supporting, because this is an interesting challenge we have, the dichotomy of money coming in, big consumer brands coming in, is often seen as a negative by the players. We're the beneficiary of a lot of endemic brands. Intel does a great job, Samsung does a great job and has done for years. Those brands are perceived as endemic and supporting. You play with their equipment. When the non-endemic brands come in, there's often a little nervousness from this massive community of, well, they're just coming in to exploit a large, if you will, consumer base, and what are they doing for us? So there's interesting challenges that the brands have coming in that we are working with them to make sure that they're seen as adding value and supporting competitive gaming rather than simply taking advantage of competitive gaming.
Yeah, I want Kevin to talk a little about that. We've talked about this before, how this is can be a finicky type audience. They're very used to, they don't want to feel like they're being pandered to. So when advertisers want to come to these platforms, what do they have to keep in mind in order to not anger the audience and turn them away?
Yeah, it's just about being well, it's really just about understanding the audience, right? What we're seeing, as Peter mentioned at Coke, a lot of brands that are very interested in the space are building entire divisions that are hired from the community, people that are gamers, that maybe participated in a particular esport, that can help craft a message and a marketing plan that really resonates, and that's really, really critical. There are stereotypes in gaming that you have to be sensitive to. There are overly forced messages that doesn't resonate. Remember, this audience is, 90% of the Twitch audience has a Netflix subscription or Hulu subscription or an Amazon Video subscription, not a cable subscription. And so they're not used to that kind of steady beat of commercials and being marketed to.
They don't want to be interrupted.
They don't mind being interrupted because they know that the broadcasters earn revenue from that. Right, so that is an interesting thing. What we've seen some brands do now, though, is actually bring our influence or some of our top broadcasters into the commercials themselves and let them deliver that authentic message. But there's lots of different ways to do it. It's really just about engaging with the game companies, engaging with the distribution platforms, the teams, the tournaments that you want to sponsor, and listening to them and hearing their ideas and maybe not exactly literally translating their ideas into your brand, but kind of merging those two theses, right? Coke has a very clear message that they want to send to their broad global audience, but to dial it in to the gaming world it takes a lot of education, a lot of open-mindedness, and a lot of experimentation.
Do you see, I mean, I know to some degree this is happening with graphics cards companies, and like you mentioned, Samsung like sponsoring a team. This team is sponsored, they wear the hat with the logo. Do you see other brands starting to get into that and wanting to sponsor teams, either of you?
Yes, but to Kevin's point, they have to be very careful that it's not just seen as logo slapping.
Right.
And you logo slap and you don't add value other than writing a check, then you fall into the challenge of the community backing away and saying, why are you here? They do get and they do enjoy the fact and will accept the fact that they're watching a commercial as part of a Twitch stream because they know the streamer needs to gain revenue somehow to pay his or her overhead and to make a living. And so there's a very clear acceptance of that. But once the big consumer brands come in, and they will, and they are, they have to come in very carefully and think through how they want to interact with the audience and be seen, not just perceived, but to be seen providing concrete support and concrete investment in building out competitive gaming for the long term, rather than come in, logo slap on a competition and walk out again.
So do you guys see an opportunity, I mean, that for a non-traditional esports advertiser to slap the logo? Do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly like Peter was saying. The opportunity right now is tremendous because it's a growing industry. And any brand that comes in today and shows their support will be forever beloved in the eyes of the audience, and the audience is only going to get bigger. So if you craft the right message, if you work with the right brands, whether it's at, again, there's many parts of the ecosystem you can work with. You got to figure out what part resonates well with your marketing plan. But if you get that right, whether it's a logo on a jersey or otherwise, what a lot of the folks want to do in esports is really help amplify the message correctly. Nissan's a really good example. They sponsored a few teams last year as a test, but they had a very long view on it, right? They didn't come in just to do a quick one-off branding exercise and then leave. But what they got from that brand was this great social engagement. So it was a holiday campaign, and the number of chat messages involving the word Nissan and the number of Twitter impressions and retweets were in the millions. And that was an unexpected result from Nissan. They thought, okay, great, we're going to get some imagery. Hopefully these guys win a trophy, and we get a picture of them hoisting the trophy. But they got all this online conversation around it, and understanding that and the quality of that is really critical. So there's some sentiment analyses companies that are helping out with that. But there's a lot of stuff you can do that, for relatively low cost compared to what you might do in sports, reach way more people. But again, the authenticity is there, or has to be there. But the opportunity right now is very, very good. You look at Coke. Coke, having been one of the first big non-endemic sponsors in the space, sponsoring one of the biggest leagues, is now everyone knows Coke esports is a thing, right? And the Coke esports Twitter has way more activity than the Coca-Cola Twitter.
Oh, wow. Yeah. More followers or just more engagement, you mean?
I don't think it quite has as many followers yet, but the engagement is something like 10x.
Mm-hmm. And they're probably real people, not bots or anything like that. So I want to talk about growing this audience. We know it's huge. We know it's a certain demographic. Peter, your theory has been, and we've talked about this, is EA has traditional football games and hockey games and so forth, so people understand it. But why would someone want to watch a virtual version of hockey or football or something when the real thing is also on television?
And therein lies the conundrum.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge opportunity for us, particularly with our FIFA franchise. We look at our servers, FIFA is sold and played in 180 countries of this world. It's
your biggest game, or one of them.
By far the biggest sports game in the world. And of course it's soccer, so it reaches and touches, and particularly here in the US, which is our biggest growing country. So we have both this opportunity for anybody who doesn't even understand competitive gaming to sit and watch two really good FIFA players play at it is an entertaining viewing experience. Unlike, quite frankly, the MOBAs, where if you don't understand League of Legends or you don't understand Dota 2, you sense something's going on, but you're not quite sure what is going on. The flip side of having a mass market game like FIFA is that we're competing with the real thing. Mm-hmm. And there's great soccer to watch, there's great NFL action to watch as well. So we have to find the right balance of making it entertaining, but also making it engaging for a player. And typically on any given year, between 27 and 32 million people will buy a copy of FIFA and play. Mm-hmm. And then the pass-along effect, and then the network effect of that. And I think our challenge is how do we start to mass marketize that make it more engaging, start to build heroes, which is something we should talk about, of the best FIFA players in the world.
Create new athletes, new
yeah,
celebrities.
I mean, the Ballon d'Or is next week, and you know, Ronaldo and Messi, and how do we get our top FIFA players to be on the same podiums as the traditional players?
Is there a Ronaldo of FIFA?
There is.
Yeah.
I mean, they're everywhere, and it's very like soccer. It's incredibly tribal. There's the best British players, there's the best German players, the best Italian players, and we culminate in the FIFA Interactive World Cup. But I think that the onus is upon us: is how do we, over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, as we build to Russia 2018 World Cup, Qatar in 2022, how do we move along with that and build our community onwards with those massive beats of the World Cup coming every 4 years?
Now, do you think that could also be a platform issue? Whereas Twitch, we know what kind of audience is there. It's a dedicated, typically gamer audience. I mean, would you consider moving on to traditional television, Facebook Live, Twitter Live, anything like that you guys could expand your audience that
Well,
way?
our broadcast arrangements right now, both for our NFL and FIFA franchises, have both what I'll call traditional broadcasts, and it's a different, and I'll explain why. But primarily, we go where the audience is, and that is the streaming platforms. That is Twitch. This past weekend, we were live on Facebook Live. We were on YouTube. So our broadcast mixture looks very different than you would imagine if you were a traditional brand looking to publish something to a wide audience. We are very focused on being able to not just broadcast, but engage in real time. Twitch does that brilliantly with social chat that sits right alongside the screen. But the NFL Network was there. Univision was there, as I mentioned. In the case of FIFA, the global broadcast interest in broadcasting FIFA video game tournaments is monstrous. So, the big guns, you might imagine, the Sky Sports, the Canal Pluses of this world, all looking with great interest of how they can complement their very expensive soccer sponsorships, whether it's the Bundesliga, the English Premier League, Liga in France, Serie A in Italy, La Liga in Spain. How can they then engage through either shoulder programming or program that sits right alongside? And in fact, the more progressive soccer clubs have started signing esports competitors to wear their actual kit. So even if they're not playing FIFA, they're playing League of Legends. Schalke in Germany, Wolfsburg in Germany, West Ham United in Manchester City and Liverpool have all signed young esports players as players on the club to wear their uniform whilst they're playing, because they know they can engage in a different way with a different audience simply by that platform.
And these are the people who might not always be watching Twitch. Is that fair to say? These people who are involved in these traditional sports games, not necessarily.
Well, but yes and no. But the example I brought up there is showing that the traditional sports clubs and leagues and teams are very now aware.
They know it's a thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Not only is it a thing, it's a threat. And so sometimes the idea of keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer would apply here, in which you saw the Philadelphia 76ers a month ago purchase 2 teams and merge them into one, and which I think was an incredibly smart move, because do they, and knowing Scott O'Neill well, do they have a real thought out strategy of how this is going to work? No. Do they know they need to be involved in a first mover, and have they received great credit and plaudits? Yes, they have, because they're embracing this potential threat and making it an opportunity for them. And we're seeing instances of clubs and people involved in traditional sports making large investments in teams and leagues as a result.
So ESPN has been exploring this. I know the biggest sports network here. They started running some esports tournaments. They got a lot of blowback. People turned on ESPN. Why am I watching video games?
Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn. So what did they do? And they're still doubling down on it. They're hiring reporters to cover it just like they cover football. What have they done wrong? It feels like they're trying to find the new World Series of poker, and it's just not quite working out.
And the reason I say get off my lawn, because it's the iconic grumpy old people.
Yeah.
And ESPN, great partners of ours, recognize that you need to refresh your audience every generation. And they know that esports in particular is engaging the young males in particular. And I don't want to keep saying males, because there's plenty of competitive gamers that are females, and there are plenty of females that love the sport. So it's not just about men. but ESPN recognizes, and they do things like Street Fighter,
Yeah.
and do a nice job with it. And they apply the ESPN magic dust of building storylines and doing, of course, world-class production. And I'm delighted they're involved. The challenge with a traditional broadcaster versus a streaming platform is that they tend to package these things up for later broadcast because it's very difficult for them to broadcast it live. If you want to watch it live, you're going to be watching it on Twitch. To a lesser extent right now, Facebook Live. But even Facebook has said this is a very important part of our strategy.
They're interested in it too.
Absolutely. Very important part of their strategy going forward, which is Facebook Live broadcasts.
Great. Well, we're out of time. Before we head out, I want both of you to make a prediction where we are when we sit here next year. What's the esports?
We'll be in New York.
Yeah. No. What's it gonna look like a year from now?
I think we're well over that $1 billion mark. I think a lot of the major brands that we've talked about have made a full, and to Kevin's point, long-term strategic commitments. I think A, out of opportunity, and B, because they have no choice if they want to continue to build relationships with the next generation coming through. Video games is already, we think, crests $100 billion in revenue this year on a global basis. And I think mobile will start to play a really important part of the competitive gaming scene over the next year or two.
Great. Kevin, where are we in a year?
Agree generally, yes. Mobile for sure. I think you're starting to see this real shift in mobile game development where it's more premium, more depth. We've seen games like Clash Royale and Hearthstone be very successful that are competitive. I think brands will certainly come in. I think they've been sniffing around for a couple of years and most of them have found a good entry point. I think you'll start to see some console games get bigger too. I have high hopes for FIFA. We've seen some really good traction working with Peter and his team. And mobile games on Twitch or in esports in general have really ebbed and flowed, but FIFA seems to be quite sticky. And there's lots of fun content you can build around that. You'll continue to see media companies come in and try things. I think to the quick point on ESPN, just as we talked about for brands, it has to be authentic. It has to feel real. And this is a very skeptical audience that, skeptical is probably not the right word, cautiously optimistic, right? They'd love for a brand like an ESPN to come in and get it right. But for them to come in is hard and risky, but they've, I think, dialed it in pretty well. And I think you'll start to see lots of different transactional models on top of sponsorships. I think you'll see more game companies try that direct user transaction model that helps fund prize pools. Crowdfunding is a very real thing that works now, right, across all aspects of life. So I'm excited to see the innovation there.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. That's all the time we have. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.